On to our second topic, which is China. China has been only reporting, or before today actually, they haven't been reporting how many people have died. I think the last number they gave was like 5,000 since December, early December, when this whole wave of COVID infection took place in China. Now, before we get into it though, make sure if you're watching this on Ganjin World to follow our channel and leave a comment below, tell us what you think. And also if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to our channel, comment below, and then also you have to like the video and subscribe, but also turn on the notification bell too. So that'll help us with all the algorithms and help us grow. But with China now today, they've announced, here's the article, a sudden number of 60,000. So this is what they said today. They said that China on Saturday, nearly 60,000 people with COVID-19. So this is a number of deaths they've announced today. This is right. This is the first ever number that they've released since the early days when they said something like 5,000 people died. Okay, but this number is so undercounting the number of actual deaths in China that it's getting ridiculous. And today I just want to break that down, why I think it's super ridiculous. They're saying that this is the amount of people that died, okay? Now, the context of all this is the fact that China basically said that they're going to stop counting COVID death after they dropped the zero COVID restrictions in early December. So from December 8th, which was technically the start of this new outbreak in China, which is still ongoing, until today, so January 13th in Beijing time, January 14th for our time, they say that only 60,000 people have died. But in this particular wave, okay, let's see if I can find it in this one, maybe not in this one, in this one. Okay, so what China's saying, that's AP, there we go. So in that 60,000 death, only 5,503 deaths include actually, supposedly, like based on China's definition, to be the actual number of people that died from COVID. The other 54,000 fatalities are from other ailments combined with COVID-19. Meaning that based on their narrow definition of what is considered a COVID death, technically only those 5,500 people are counted as direct COVID death. The other 54,000 people that China has, after they refined their definition, doesn't technically count as the number of people who died from COVID, but COVID-related death. Why does it matter? Because this is what China does. They're trying to whitewash the severity or their policy on COVID. They're saying that despite all this, China has only about 60,000 people that died. And this number is so out of whack with the actual mortality rate around the world, right? So I went online and I searched. This is the latest number for Hong Kong. And they have their updates every single day for Hong Kong. This is straight from the Chinese government's website, the Hong Kong government's website. Just data that's updated till today shows that based on case fatality, so the first number here is case fatality. The case fatality since 2021, which was the start of their so-called fifth wave, or sorry, 2022, around January, which was their fifth wave. Based on that, as of right now, the case fatality rate, so how many people have died after they've been determined to have COVID-19, so the case, right, is 0.45%. Now, if based on that, if you have had at least 2 doses of the COVID-19 vaccine, your death rate drops down to 0.15. If you've only had 1 dose or no doses, so you're not vaccinated, your mortality rate here is 1.71%. What does that mean? Basically, they're saying our case fatality rate here is 0.45%. The context for Hong Kong is that almost 50% of their people are vaccinated with the Chinese vaccine. The other half are vaccinated with BioNTech, which is basically like Pfizer. So because Hong Kong is so comparable to China, this is a good base for us to determine what the real number could be in China for the number of deaths. Okay, because Hong Kong, Chinese people there, they have a similar government system. They also went through a period of zero COVID. The only difference is that they're accessible to the mRNA vaccine, like Pfizer, basically. That's the only difference they have. But let's just take this 1.71%, okay? The reason I want to take this number is because Chinese vaccine is very ineffective. At most, it would prevent you from getting an infection for like 3 to 6 months. And after that, it's no longer effective. And that's just based on the fact that we compare it to a mRNA vaccine. The efficacy of the Chinese vaccine is at least half as effective as the Pfizer ones, right? The reason why I want to use the 1.71 is because when you consider China with and then Hong Kong has a much better healthcare system, especially for seniors, and they have more ICU beds per, I think, 1,000 people. They have had a much more transparent, relatively transparent reporting system compared to China. So it's a very good base for us because what we say about Hong Kong, China is likely more. So if Hong Kong is reporting, now again, I'm using the 1.71 because this is one dose or no dose of the vaccine, right? You consider how ineffective Chinese vaccines are, it makes more sense to use this percentage rather than the 2-dose one, which is 0.15. Okay, but let's not even go to 1.71. Let's just assume that the case fatality rate in China is only 1%, okay? 1%. Now, if you're saying 1%, that's really good, especially with considering what other countries around the world have, right? All of the United States, all these years, like Omicron, the Delta variant, everything combined, that overall case fatality rate is around 1%. So we're talking like 1% is a very conservative number for China, given what we just said. And they also don't have access to oral COVID drugs like Paxlovid. Their own drugs aren't as effective. And there's the ICU bed clogs. We saw so many videos on the crematoriums in China being overflowed with patients and not patients, dead bodies, right? And then you have to wait up to some places like 17 days or even a month now just to get your relative's body burned. So the entire healthcare system in China has collapsed, right? But let's just use 1% for this sake. The reason why I use 1% is because Peking University actually did a study recently. And this study has been deleted off of Chinese internet because the numbers they use are particularly so interesting. So they say, based on this conclusion, over 900 million people in the country may have been infected with the new, supposed to be new crown virus, which is coronavirus, and that 80% of the infected people think that the level of discomfort exceed that of the flu. So if 900 million people in the country have been infected as we speak, okay? And again, this number is probably undercounting it too, just because China is changing their definition so much. 1% of 900 million people is 9 million people. So based on this number of cases that the China study has done, which again, they deleted it off the internet for some reason, we just have the archive, 9 million people have died in China. That's a crazy amount of number because what they told us, again, only 60,000 people have died from COVID in China from the period of December 8th until January 12th. But there's another number we can look at, which is if you consider Shanghai right now, the original cremation time, so how long it takes for a body to get cremated, is 4 days. Now it has been extended to 16 days, so 4 times more. And the original time in the crematoriums for operation is 8 hours a day, but it's been changed to 24 hours. So that means it is now 3 times more the number of hours that it has to operate, 4 times the wait time. So that's based on that, the projection of the current number of deaths in the city of Shanghai should be 12 times more than that of a normal time period. So meaning that the daily death toll at least would exceed something like 4,000 deaths per day. Now, if the current death toll in Shanghai is 12 times more than before, we can say that the current death toll in China could be something like 263,000 a day. Okay, so that means more than 1 million people would die in 4 days. So every single day, based on what's happening in Shanghai, just based on the crematorium availability, the numbers show that that's about 260,000 people a day. A UK firm, Airfinity, estimates that 25,000 people would die from COVID every single day in China. So UK firm estimates a very conservative number. That's 10 times less than what Shanghai could be going through. And then if we consider the fact that I just said 9 million people could have died based on this study, which China did. So this one here, the Peking University one, which is taking basically how they did this was they took search engine results of people who have been searching online about once they caught fever, once they were infected with COVID, or they tested positive, what to do about calming the fever, what drugs to use, etc. So they took that search result from Chinese search engine. Basically, everybody that has a smartphone can do that search, and then extrapolated that number to reflect on the total number of death, which they got, total number of infection, which in their conclusion is 900 million people in China. But here's the problem. Seniors in China, even my grandma has a phone, but she does not know how to use the search engine, search function too. She can only make a call. She can't even really make a video call because she doesn't know how. There are a ton of senior people in China who are in this category as they've described, but do not have actually shown that they're part of the number of death or the number of total cases. So I'm thinking that this 900 million is actually lower than what it's supposed to be. There's also another data that says 90% of China has been infected. So if we say a 1.4 billion people population in China, that's about 1.2 billion people infected. So even if we take that number and a 1% case fatality rate, that's what is that? 12 million people that have died, at least, right? So by any margin or just any like basic deduction reasoning, China could not have had only 60,000 deaths in that period of time. And given the fact that just this pure amount of videos that we've seen online, it just shows that what they're doing is simply trying to use a smaller number to justify their action. Like when this number came out today, 60,000, they're saying, wow, China's COVID response is so good, but there's no more COVID. After 3 years of zero COVID, what happened? They just suddenly let the floodgate open and they just took away everything, right? Hospitals are not ready to tackle this problem. The entire health system basically collapsed, even in Beijing. And there were people saying that in China, in one city, that number of deaths, the 60,000, would be what they would see daily. And I was hearing some of my friends say, they were hearing stories of relatives in China saying like 17 of their relatives died. It was their friend's relative who had 17 other relatives who've died from COVID. And then I was also hearing stories of the entire family getting COVID. No death in that particular case, but people are getting infected really, really fast, right? And this kind of goes against, here's the number. So this is what we have for around the world, right? So this is considering the entire 3 years of COVID, what the case fatality ratio is. And based on this, like, let's look at the United States, right? The US has, at this moment, a 1.1% fatality rate based on how many people have died from COVID, but it does include things like Delta death, Omicron death, and the original variant death, right? So the percentage is much lower because Omicron in the West has something like a 0.7% fatality rate, so much less than a 1%, right? If you look at countries like the UK, United Kingdom has a 0.9%, Italy is 0.7%, in some places like Moldova and Armenia, that's 2.0%, right? So even if we use any percentage like 0.5% or 0.7%, let's say, okay, just based on the sheer number of infections, let's use that 9 million again, that's still 900 million infections in China. We use a 0.7% rate, that's still 6.3 million deaths. So I just don't understand why they think it's okay to just lie about this. But then again, they've been doing it for a very long time. And in fact, back during the early days of the pandemic, George Calhoun, who is a professor of, I believe, quantitative studies at a university near me here, Stevens Institute, when I interviewed him, he wrote this article here, right? Let me just show you. So based on the original, let's see if this is it. Yeah. Okay, so based on the numbers here, let me find it. Okay. Back in the days, when the United States had more than 825,000 people die from COVID, China's official death count was 4,636. Okay? The difference in mortality rate is even more shocking. The Chinese government reports a COVID death rate overall of 0.3% per 100,000 population. The US COVID death was 248 per 1,000, 800 times higher. So back in the days, during the early days of the COVID infection, the whole outbreak, pandemic, China was only reporting a 0.32 death per 1,000 people, 100,000 people, sorry. And then the COVID death back then for the US was 248. 248 people died per 100,000 people. In China, 0.3 person died per 100,000 people. Isn't that crazy? That's 800 times lower than the death of the US at the onset of the pandemic. And there's something else that was pretty ridiculous. Let me find it here. China's official statistics understate the Chinese COVID death rate by 17,000%. So for them to say there's 60,000 deaths today, it's really, honestly, you shouldn't be shocked by this. I'm shocked by the sheer audacity for them to continue to say stuff like this. But just the fact that they could be, like, you could add 2 zeros to that 60,000, so it becomes 6 million, and it still probably wouldn't be the official tally. And this is the idea that China knows exactly how many people died. They have 3 different ways to count for the total death, right? They have the birth population registry, they have hospital data, and they also have a variety of data set that they can access with the big data system. So just for them to say that only 60,000 people died is really just, it's a huge lie. There's no other way to put it. But that's, you know, it's the nature of the Communist Party, and that's what they will do. So anyways, today is a little bit, a lot of this stuff with numbers, but I hope it kind of makes sense. But let me know in the comments what you think. If you believe this number, I certainly don't. And let me know if you think there's some calculations that you've done yourself, and maybe it could help us make sense of this as well. But make sure to subscribe to our channel on YouTube and follow us on Ganjing World as well. And also like the video, help with our algorithm. Thanks so much for watching today's live stream. I'm David Zhang. This is State of Politics. We'll see you next time.